Spokesperson, Paul Kohler.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Though I've not held the spokesperson role for long, I've met veterans, victims and survivors, academics and members from across this House and the other place. Those conversations have been humbling and instructive, reminding me of the horror Northern Ireland endured and the courage of those who lived through and served during the Troubles. I want to begin by recognising the Secretary of State's work in bringing forward this bill. Dealing with the legacy of the past requires legislation and practical action the public can trust. I want to make it clear the Liberal Democrats welcome the intent to repeal and replace Part 2, certain aspects of Part 3 of the Conservatives' failed Legacy Act. That legislation was a profound misjudgment. It commanded no confidence in Northern Ireland, was opposed by every major party and placed the UK in breach of its human rights obligations. Not only did the Tories provide conditional immunity for serious Troubles-related crimes, they also offended victims and the shadowness seems to forget this, alienated veterans by appearing to equate them with terrorists. This bill rightly removes those provisions, ends immunity and restores the principle that no one is beyond the law. Clause 1 confirms that the Independent Commission for Reconciliation and Information Recovery will continue under a new name, the Legacy Commission, with reformed governance and functions. This recognises the need to rebuild a process the people of Northern Ireland can trust. We support the government's intent to reform the Commission, but expectations are high and confidence is fragile. Any effective legacy process must also ensure that narratives of the Troubles remain accurate, that victims of terrorism are neither forgotten nor morally equated with perpetrators. At the same time, they were victims of lawful and occasionally unlawful acts by the state, whose right to truth is equally important. Only a system founded on transparency, independence and fairness can command confidence across all communities, with previous actions, such as the letters of comfort issued to paramilitaries in the past, did so much to undermine. Clause 3 sets out the Legacy Commission's structures and functions, including investigating deaths and serious harm, holding inquisitorial proceedings, producing a full record of deaths and securing public confidence, a requirement that I strongly welcome. It also establishes an oversight board to provide strategic direction and scrutiny, but with the board drawn from within the organisation, the real test of its effectiveness will lie in the independence and integrity of those appointed to lead the Commission in the first place. Clauses 4 to 6 give the Secretary of State power to appoint commissioners, directors of investigation, and judicial panel members. Even with the consultation requirements under Clause 9, this concentration of powers risks undermining trust. Appointments through the Northern Ireland Judicial Appointments Commission or a similar independent mechanism would surely strengthen public confidence. My concern is heightened as the Secretary of State also appoints the Victim and Survivors Advisory Group under Clause 8. When one person controls both the Commission's leadership and its advisory body, independence is difficult to discern. Turning to the fundamental issue of veterans' protections under the bill, these amount to the following. Unsolicited contact would be limited to official channels, which is clearly important. There will be an end to repeat investigations, but the undefined caveat, unless it is essential to do so, leaves the scope unclear. Veterans will have the ability to seek anonymity, although provisions to that effect already exist under the Criminal Evidence Act. Veterans will have the right to give evidence remotely, but there will not be a default presumption to do so. Veterans' welfare will have to be considered, which is at best vague, and veterans will be represented on the Ministerial Advisory Group, which, whilst welcome, does not in itself offer protection. Veterans are surely right in arguing this is not enough. This has implications not just for them, but our current service personnel and potential future recruits. As the 9 four-star generals who wrote to the Times last week made clear, the provisions of the bill have profound implications for both service morale and future recruitment.
May I intervene?
Of course.
Thank you very much for allowing me to intervene. My family have served in the army for many generations, including myself in the Troubles in Northern Ireland, and indeed my son now. We have seen and deeply admired the Army's core values of courage, discipline, respect, integrity, loyalty and selfless commitment. Would my honourable friend accept that the retired generals and the many serving funds of my son make an extremely pertinent point when they say that Northern Ireland Troubles Bill will negatively impact retention and recruitment in the British Army at a time when we are desperate to bolster our armed forces?
Before Mr Kohler resumes his position, we must keep interventions short. We have many people wishing to contribute. Paul Kohler.
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention, and yes, I absolutely agree. This will have profound implications for both service morale and future recruitment, particularly in respect to our special forces, which is why the bill must go further. With over 10% of the Lib Dem benches made up of former members of the armed services, my parliamentary party is acutely aware of the risks veterans took, the sacrifices they and their fallen comrades made. Our concern is fairness, not shielding a wrongdoing. Many veterans under this bill will remain exposed to uncertainty, possible retrospective judgment, and scrutiny over sensitive personal data and service records. This concern is heightened by the stark disparity in record keeping. Veterans' actions were documented in detail, whereas the activities of those engaged in terrorism were not. This results in an imbalance in documentary evidence that must be acknowledged and addressed. It is also noteworthy that whilst the state has protected itself through the Secretary of State's discretion over the handling of sensitive information, this bill gives veterans no such safeguards. Veterans deserve assurances that their service rights and data are treated fairly, securely and proportionately.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. The IRA campaign of terror against the British people was one of the darkest chapters in our history. The shields of Airy Neve, Ian Gow, Robert Bradford and Sir Anthony Berry demonstrate that. Does he agree with me that the armed servicemen represented here today, they defended us, and it's this job, the job of this Parliament, to ensure that they are now defended?
I thank the gentleman for his intervention. I absolutely agree. We must never equate our armed forces with the paramilitaries and terrorists on both the nationalist and unionist side. Veterans deserve assurance their services, rights and data are treated fairly, securely and proportionately. That's why we are calling the government to come forward with binding statutory safeguards, including a clearer presumption against repeat investigations without objectively certified new and significant evidence, an expanded duty to consider operational context, strengthened welfare protections and a presumption of remote participation. It is of course important that the voices, not just of veterans, but all victims and survivors are heard. And Clause 8 does this by establishing a group to advise both the Legacy Commission and the Secretary of State. However, its members will be appointed by the Secretary of State, with its numbers limited to as little as 3 and no more than 7, which risks its voice being limited and its independence being compromised. But by concentrating sweeping powers in the hands of the Secretary of State, the bill risks creating an opaque system that offers little genuine parliamentary oversight or scrutiny. As honourable members are aware, there is already a Commission for Victims and Survivors, which has for almost 2 decades ensured those most affected by the Troubles are heard. There is a real danger that the proposed Victims and Survivors Ministerial Advisory Group, despite its separate function, might trespass into the existing forum's domain, which, with its wide range of perspectives, including veterans from both unionist and nationalist backgrounds and those who have served in the Crown Forces, has that all-important cross-community legitimacy. Trust is so important. Capturing that breadth and establishing that trust, the newly proposed, much smaller advisory group will be difficult. I therefore ask the government to clarify how the new advisory group will interact with the existing forum. Will the Commissioner for Victims and Survivors have a formal role in the advisory group? How otherwise will the voices of veterans and former security personnel who are both victims and key stakeholders be heard? I will.
I'm grateful to Honourable Friend for giving way. Would you agree that with veterans who are sometimes serving in Northern Ireland, then pursued by the IRA to Germany and attacked there, what they deserve is more reassurance than the words that duplication will not occur unless it's essential?
I thank my honourable friend for their intervention. I absolutely agree. We must go further, must do more for veterans. This bill does not go far enough at this stage. My party has always opposed the Legacy Act, but we are clear that its replacement must address the legitimate concerns of veterans. However, as one can see from the joint statement issued last night by the Veterans Commissioners of the devolved nations, that is not currently the case. Right. They have expressed concerns shared on these benches. The bill, as currently drafted, does not provide sufficient safeguards for veterans, nor against lawfare, historical narrative revision, and disparities between how ex-security personnel and others will be treated. That's why my party submitted a reasoned amendment and will be supporting the Conservative one to deny the bill a second reading until the fundamental issue of sufficient protection for veterans is addressed, along with enhanced parliamentary oversight, safeguarding the independence of appointments, clarifying the role of victims and survivors advisory group, and ensuring no government can use ministerial discretion to shut down the search for the truth. I realise that will disappoint the Secretary of State, but I reiterate what I said at the beginning of my speech. My party commends him for all his hard work in seeking to move forward from the Tories' failed Legacy Act. Its successor, however, must command genuine confidence across all communities whilst ensuring our veterans' peace of mind. I pledge on behalf of my party to do all we can to help him achieve that goal.
Tanya and Taliazzi. Thank you, Madam Deputy.